You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. My name is James Wallner. This is an off-season or standalone episode about something different. Some of you may recall that last year I did some interviews with podcast producers from around the globe. One of those producers is Alison Sandy, one of a team of journalists working at the news organization named 7 News in Australia. Their podcast, titled The Lady Vanishes, is about Marion Barter, who went missing in 1997 at the age of 51. When I spoke to Alison last year, they were just about to begin an inquest into Marion's disappearance. It's over a year later now, and the Lady Vanishes podcast has been downloaded about 12 million times, and there are a whopping 40 episodes to binge. And some very exciting things have been happening in that story, and I thought it was about time to check in again with Alison to talk about what's been going on in that case. Now, you know how I sometimes say at the beginning of an episode, hey, if you've not listened to XYZ, you should go back and listen first, or this won't make sense? I'm not saying that this time. Even if you've not listened to a single episode of The Lady Vanishes, I say listen in on this interview with Alison anyway. Sure, it won't all make sense maybe, but you'll get most of it, and I'm confident that you'll want to start listening to the podcast afterwards. In my opinion, it's one of the most fascinating true crime stories ever to be told in a podcast. In fact, if it weren't for the podcast, just about nobody would know about this case, and missing Marion Barter's daughter, Sally Layden, would still be without any answers whatsoever. So let's get into it. Here's Alison Sandy of 7 News in Australia speaking to me about the Lady Vanishes podcast. Alison Sandy, it's a pleasure to see you again. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us on Dakota Spotlight.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you, James, for being such a supporter.
You bet. I'm so happy to talk to you again. I spoke with you a year ago in July, right before the inquest was going to start. And so some of my listeners know about your story, but of course, a lot of them don't know this story, The Lady Vanishes. So let's bring them up to speed just in the general terms. I'll try, and you correct me as I go along here. So it's a missing persons case in Australia, in Eastern Australia, and Marion Barter was 51, I believe, when she told her adult children, son and daughter, that, hey, I'm making some life changes here. She was divorced. She said, I'm going to go on a trip around the world or on a trip for a few months, and basically it made some bigger changes, like she sold her house kind of suddenly. And I think the adult kids were kind of like, okay, you go, Mom, if this is what you want to do. But she never came back. She is missing since was this in 96?
97.
97. I was close.
Yes.
So it's a missing persons case. And you guys have been working on this for 3 years. And I wanted to talk to you about, I wanted to get you back on Dakota Spotlight because, in my opinion, this is just a perfect example of how powerful podcasts are. And, you don't talk about it a lot on The Lady Vanishes. It comes up, but it's very clear to me, and I want the world to know, people don't know, that this case, first of all, you're getting close to answers, you think, and this would have not have happened without the podcast. Say what you want about all your supporters, but this would have not happened without the podcast, basically because, and I'm going to let you pipe in here in a second, is she was not even considered a missing person when you started this show or this season, correct?
That's correct. So when we started 3 years ago in 2019, there wasn't a case because they didn't believe any crime had been committed, and she wasn't considered missing, and she wasn't on the missing person register. So we were starting from scratch. A lot of these cold cases, they have an inquest, or there's a body, or something's happened, and somebody's already looked into it, at least in some elaborate detail. And being able to draw on an inquest is great because you have all the documents and all the relevant people have been spoken to. We didn't have any of that. So we had to start from scratch. Luckily, Marion's daughter, Sally, had an amazing portfolio, I guess, for want of a better word, of information and documents. And initially when I got involved, because I specialise in freedom of information, I got involved for that purpose, to help her with the Freedom of Information application, because they weren't giving her any information or any valuable information. It was mostly redacted. and then do the external review. But of course, as you know, media driving the public eye, that public, I guess, spotlight on any of these sorts of situations really helps to, I guess, address the issues, because there's nowhere to hide. And so after speaking to all the relevant people and getting a lot of information out there, and certainly it hasn't been perfect. I mean, we've had this saying, no stone left unturned. So we've chased every rabbit down every hole, and there've been a lot of wrong holes and a lot of wrong rabbits. And certainly, people can always be critical, always in hindsight, and we get overwhelming positive reviews, but then there's the people like, well, why didn't you know that somebody would put an ad in the paper that would be a false name? Like, everyone does that. Well, I don't do that. So I don't, this is not in my, I don't live in that world where, I should be considering this. We're journalists, we cover things, we report things, and so from our perspective, that's what we do. We just keep, looking under rocks and chasing everything that we can. So yeah, sure, there could have been things that we did differently, but this is our first potential murder investigation, and disappearance that we've kind of instigated ourselves and relied upon people to advise us. We don't have criminology degrees or police detective experience. Yeah. And certainly what we've learned is in a lot of these cases that when a conclusion is drawn at the beginning, it's really hard to convince authorities that conclusion is wrong. So you're really shoveling, for want of another better word, the proverbial uphill, trying to get them to say, well, actually, maybe we were wrong. Maybe we need to reconsider this.
40 episodes later and 12 million downloads. Is that about right?
We're up to 13 million. Every time we put out a couple more episodes, we sort of go up a million, which is nice.
That's incredible. I mean, I heard you say in one of the episodes that you had a TV documentary team with you. Can you comment? Will there be a film documentary? There's got to be.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're working on that basis. So, I mean, it's still going and it's one of those things that, we're in conclusion. But absolutely, that is the plan. So we try to get as much footage now with what we do, because obviously being a podcast, you don't generally do that. It's just looking at audio. So now we're just ramping up. But being a television company that I work for, we with the 7 Network, we have been filming as well, but not as much as we are now.
So, but you guys have done a phenomenal job. And to give my listeners a little more perspective here, let's look at some of the milestones that happened. So first of all, you helped to get her back on the missing persons list, right? Eventually, law enforcement said, all right, she's missing. How did that go down?
Well, it was a hard fought, I can tell you. And part of the reason we were able to do it is because of the support. The power of the people, I guess. And that's one great thing that podcasts can really do. So we had this phenomenal amount of support, and we had a group, a very tight-knit group that we call Sally's Angels, I guess, who were around and really helped get a petition underway. Jen Marsh has been the instigator of that. And just every time anyone would post on any of our Facebook or anything like that, Jen would send them a message, please sign our petition, and you know what I mean? Like just those little things that, when we're writing the podcast and Sally's trying to, is overwhelmed with everything that's happening, and it just to have people like that who take on those tasks is just so important. So so we got that order on the missing persons register. It was I don't know what it's like in the US, but we feel like we had to drag authorities kicking and screaming to see it from the point of view with the facts painted, or sort of in front of them, saying that, well, yeah, she fits the definition. And we also had to point out that the main thing was pointing out that nobody actually spoke to her at the time, that it was all kind of Chinese whispers, that that someone had contacted Marion and she said she wanted to go off on her own volition and start a new life. And again, even if that was true, it's been 25 years, so I'm sure even if you did want to start a new life, it doesn't mean it's meant to be forever, right? So that was our argument, and of course, from there on, we've uncovered a lot of, untoward behaviour, and.
How did you and Sally get the information that Marion might have come back and under this new names and passport, saying she was now a housewife in Luxembourg?
Okay, so that was through the police, and that had been revealed to Sally, it hadn't been that long, and I guess that was to support the police's argument that she went missing of her own volition, that she changed her name, she sold her house, she moved, went over to Luxembourg, and that's what happened to indicate that support their theory that she just wanted to start a new life without her family, and she had the right to do that. And so her, as a result, they justified also that Sally couldn't receive any of the documents about her because in their eyes she was still alive. But of course there's supposed to be a proof of life check done, and there has to be some, as a result, proof of life. And of course, when we did it and they did it, they found that there was nothing that could support the theory that she was alive.
And the name she had adopted was very rare. And so the next big milestone is one of your, I think you call them super sleuths, but one of your listeners, I believe, got on board and started looking, I guess, online or for newspaper articles, whatever, for this name, Remakel, or now you're pronouncing it another way, I guess. It's like
Remarkable, yeah. Well, because we're going on, I think it was in the inquest, the person who had used that name fraudulently said that we were pronouncing it wrong. He pointed out that we're pronouncing it wrong, Remarkable, which is interesting because the name he's now using, he has pronounced two different ways. So it was interesting that Remarkable he was very poignant, or wanted to, very, I guess, deliberate in the way that's pronounced, but not his current name.
This super sleuth finds this advertisement of a gentleman named, is it Ferdinand Remarkable, looking for love, basically. And it's such an uncommon name that it takes you off on this journey to Luxembourg yourself, which we talked about the last time I interviewed you. You knock on this person's door, and he seemed very uncooperative. Also, when you interviewed him later or tried to talk to him on the phone. And I remember us talking about that last time, and it's like this, I'm thinking this has to be, well, it doesn't have to be, but this why is he not cooperating more? And now we've learned he himself was a victim of identity theft. And a couple years later now, or another year later, you've just gone through this long inquest. I think you guys originally said you would have one episode after the first week and one episode after the second. And then it turned out to be much bigger than that. And also, I kind of laughed in one of the last conversation episodes you had that you said, I don't even know what number this is anymore. Like, we're beyond keeping, it really is fascinating, this whole thing. But can you just tell us about what you've uncovered here about this Mr. Bloom or Blum, or how many names does he have, and who is this character? He is so aggravating to listen to his responses in the inquest. Can you just bring my listeners up to speed a little bit?
Okay, so the name that he stole was Fernand Nicolas Remarkable, and he's a real man in Luxembourg. It happened to be the ex-husband of a woman that is potentially the only woman he seems to have really been fond of. I mean, obviously he's been married for more than 40 years as well, this Rick Blum, who stole Fernand's name. So what happened is we had our main super sleuth, Joni. She found the ad on Trove, and it was not an easy ad to find. And, you know, to this day, I still kind of scratch my head on how she managed to do it, because when she put in the name Fernand Remarkle, it might have even just been Remarkle that she put in, she ended up not getting the hit with the name in its entirety. But then when she put spaces between the names, who thinks to do that, right? I mean, I think, well, that's remarkable. I mean, probably people who do this for a living, but she's just a armchair detective, I guess, you know, fascinated with this sort of stuff. And she'd actually done searches in relation to a relative of hers, and that's how she knew how to do all these things. Anyway, or long-lost relative, I should say. So when she did that, that's when she had the hit with the ad. So, again, chasing every rabbit down every hole, it would be remiss of us not to try at least the real Fernand Remarkle. I mean, you know, a needle in the haystack. How do we know that it was, it was necessarily a fraudulent name that was used?
Yeah.
And track him down. And it turns out there was a connection between the real Fernand Remarkle and this man, Rick Blum, who had stolen his name. Now, once we made that connection, it was various ways. The police, by this stage, the police had agreed, the coroner had agreed to do an inquest, an inquest was warranted on Marion Barter. So that was terrific. So the police reopened the investigation. They say it was never closed, but let's face it. So they reopened the investigation and they found the connection, as well as a listener who went down to the library, the local library, with the phone number that was in the ad. Now, we tried several other ways with the phone number, but with the post office box, the post office was burnt down and all those records were gone. And, you know, the number in different ways, trying to get Telstra to help us. But it turns out the local Ballina library, I think it was, had the number and it was connected to this coin selling business. And the man who had used that name, Fernand Remarkle, fraudulently owned this business. And that was how the connection was made. But of course, by that stage, he was going under the name Rick Blum. And it turns out he had many aliases, at least 30, probably 60, probably double that in reality. But we know at least 30 of these aliases.
We'll be right back to my interview with Alison Sandy, producer of the Lady Vanishes, after this.
Life in the upper Midwest isn't always so nice, don't you know? But that's what makes the stories on the Vault podcast so darn interesting. The Vault brings you the stories of cold cases, crime, and mysteries from communities throughout the upper Midwest, using decades of archived news coverage and told by our teams of professional journalists. Look for the Vault podcast wherever you find your podcasts.
Now back to Alison Sandy, producer of the Lady Vanishes podcast in Australia about missing Marion Barter. When we left her, Alison was telling us about Rick Blum, who had at least 30 aliases.
Rick Blum is a convicted fraudster. He was jailed in France, so we know that. And he has also admitted to writing ads to lure women and lying as part of that, as though he's not married with children. People would say that he was the original Tinder swindler. This part is factual in the sense that he had, catfished women, started relationships in whatever way, usually, it seems through these sort of Lonely Hearts ads. And in this day, there was no, obviously, internet or anything. And he started relationships with them. They never lasted long, and they were all kind of with the same modus operandi, get them to sell their house, move overseas, and start a new life, just like what Marion was doing. So the connection was there. He admitted that he'd had a relationship with Marion around the time that she went missing. He said that she put an ad in the local paper, one of the local papers, and he had rang her, and that's their relationship started off. But he denies having ever gone to Europe with her at the time, and of course having anything to do with her disappearance. So that's where we're at now. The coroner's had all the findings. He's been interrogated as part of the inquest, and now the coroner has to decide whether or not she's going to recommend charges be laid against him, whether there's enough evidence. I mean, at this stage, it's a bit different in Australia to the way it works. They'll still be loath to admit she's dead. That seems to be that they're more likely to have an open finding, say that she's probably deceased, but they don't know. And it will be interesting to see whether or not they recommend those charges be laid. There certainly is a case. There certainly is reason for more investigation. He definitely perjured himself. There were much information that was said in there that has been proven as false. So his wife was also part of the inquest. And we know of his adult children as well. And we've had lots of people reach out to us with information. There's a lot of information, and I know that Joni and Sally have been compiling a lot of the extra information, and they want the authorities to take it on as new evidence. But it's weird with the way it works. I don't even know if they're accepting the new evidence that they've provided them. It still feels like an uphill battle in this case. And having talked to Americans with their system, it seems like it's not, there seems to be much more aggressive with their chasing down people who potentially were involved in these sorts of situations. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what happens from here.
It'll be very, very interesting. And again, 40 episodes, there's no way in this interview with you that, my dear listeners can get a full picture of this story. So all I'm going to say is I recommend all of you to go out and just listen to all 40 episodes. I mean, if you're driving, if you're cleaning your home, all I hear is people want more and more true crime content. And, when's the next episode going to come out, James? Well, here is 40 hours of great content to listen to, and a great example of how a podcast can make a huge difference. I want to talk about something a little bit different that you don't get to talk about too often, maybe, is how has this affected your life personally? Or this is 3 years you've been working on this, and it's, probably one of the, this must be the biggest true crime Australian podcast. Would that be correct?
It's one of the biggest. Another one, which your listeners might be familiar with, is named Teacher's Pet, and they just got a murder conviction. Wow. As a result of that podcast. It was a big contributor to it as well. So that's also, and I think that's already going to be a movie or something. So it's quite phenomenal. So they're a little bit ahead of us in respect to getting a result. And I look at it. I look at that case, and I look at ours, and I think they have a really. I spoke to the detective that worked on that case for our next episode because I wanted to hear how many roadblocks, because let's face it, and you know it as well, there are so many roadblocks you have to overcome to, you learn to be a lot more patient and tolerant, I guess. Try not to let the frustration overwhelm you with all the different, barriers that you come across. And he was really dedicated. He believed in it the whole time. And I think Sally, having, been on this journey with her, feels a bit of frustration that there hasn't been that law enforcement ally in the same way as there was with that one. And that has been tough. And because it has been a hard-won battle, there still seems to be some lingering resentment. I mean, Sally was told at the end of the inquest, basically, that we've spent $1 million, 21 days, all this stuff on this, and she should be grateful, basically. That's, if this is as far as it goes, she should be grateful. That was the impression that was
oh my goodness,
was given. And I think that's really hard for Sally because she doesn't do this lightly. It takes a big toll on her and her family. You're basically putting your life out there, open for everyone to see, all the different members, and it's so harrowing. And then to be told, well, you should actually be grateful, regardless of, we've put a lot of effort into this, and to compile all this extra information like her and Joni have, and then kind of, being told thanks but no thanks. It seems to be the impression. It's really frustrating. So I have spoken to a lot of other people who were in Sally's boat since, and one thing I have discovered is this is not uncommon. The way families of victims are treated, they're seen as such a hindrance. And, I think a lot of police are great, don't get me wrong. And we've got I've spoken to some great detectives, most of them retired now, who have just been just fabulous with but they acknowledge as well. I mean, I spoke to one detective who, there was a killing up in Charleville, which is in rural Queensland, and it was viewed as an accident. And he knew that something was wrong, but he basically had to fight against the system to get them to take it seriously. And then, he was told, he was discouraged, basically leave it alone, told that that the most they'd get is a coronial. And in the end, because of his devotion, and I suppose also there was an insurance claim, a massive insurance claim, so he had the insurance company helping fund, I guess, his plight, and he was an officer, right? They found the husband guilty of her murder. It wasn't an accident, and it was.
Wow.
It's just crazy how there seems to be a lot of hidden homicide, as we call it. There's been many that we look at. There was another one that was a murder-suicide involving two best friends, again in Queensland, in Australia, which was overturned after 3 inquests as a double homicide, not a murder-suicide by the friend, again, the husband. And it's, so there's a lot of that. And there's another one out at the moment called Matty, which is Matt Levison, and his parents have spoken about their one. Now, he was gay, and he got killed by his partner, but again, the family had to basically lead the plight to get that taken seriously. And fortunately, they had a police officer on their side, Gary Jubilant, who has his own podcast, I Catch Killers, and he and again, so they got justice on that one. But it's just, but they were told at the time, we've broken our budget, searching for, on this case, basically made to feel bad that the police were spending was forced to spend so much money on finding the killer or convicting the killer of their son.
Oh,
and, it was like the climax of that was basically making a deal with the killer, saying he'll get immunity if they tell him where the body is. And the family didn't know that this deal had been struck, but it had, and he did. He told him, the killer told him where the body was, and the police were digging for days and days, and then eventually his T-shirt surfaced, and they could see it with and they knew that it was their son, and that was that. And every day these are people's lives, and I think I've now become so passionate for this cause. Nothing is worse than losing a loved one. My passion for this subject and people, victims of crimes, I mean, I like to think I've become a bit of a victim of crime advocate as a result of this. Yeah, I'll work on other projects exposing the system and how hopefully it might lead to changes in the system and cases like this to be treated differently. But I also just want to thank you, James, because, I mean, what the work you do, and just to have someone, you don't understand till you go through it. But, Barbara Cotton, the work you've done there, it's just phenomenal. And it's a different world over in North Dakota. Fascinating looking at how things are in America and the system.
One last time to my listeners, go listen to the Lady Vanishes podcast. It's amazing. And to you, best of luck in the future. Maybe we can talk again.
Absolutely, James. I'm sure we'll be in touch over many years, and I'll be following you diligently with Dakota Spotlight. And so thank you so much for having us.
Thank you,
Means
Alison.
a lot. Okay, take care.
You too. That's all for this time, folks. Check out The Lady Vanishes anywhere you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. My name is James Wallner. Dakota Spotlight is a production of Forum Communications. Find more at inforum.com/Dakota Spotlight. You can follow me on Twitter at Dakota Spotlight, and please consider becoming a member of the Dakota Spotlight Facebook group. If you're brand new to Dakota Spotlight, there are currently 7 seasons you can binge right now anywhere you get your podcasts. Thanks all for listening. I'll see you next time.